UFC Fight Night Vegas 71, Jan versus Dvalishvili takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main events, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Carlston Harris versus Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I'm going to start with Carlston Harris over Abubakar Nurmagomedov here. I think he's got this one in the bag. I really did like Carlston Harris as a prospect coming into the UFC. I know he was a little bit older at the time, but I still really did believe in him. I even picked him to beat Shavkat Rakhmonov, and then we found out who Shavkat Rakhmonov was, and since then he's been on an absolute tear, so I was wrong in that prediction. But since then, we haven't really seen Carlston Harris fight. He's had a few fights booked, hasn't really been able to get things going, and now he's got this one booked against Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I think Carlston Harris is way more dangerous than Abubakar Nurmagomedov. Now, I think they're quite even in terms of their ability, in their grappling, in maybe Carlston Harris has a bit of the edge in the striking, but only because I think he's got a massive, massive finishing advantage over Abubakar Nurmagomedov here. We don't seem to see any kind of finishing ability out of Abubakar Nurmagomedov. He seems to just sort of barely do enough with his hustle and his grind to get wins by decision. He did that against Omar Gadziev. He did that against Jared Gooden. He's had a few of those fights. You know, he drew to Bojan Velikovic at PFL, and he had the loss to David Zawada in the UFC, got triangle choked. He's been finished before in his career at PFL against Pavel Kuch, who submitted him in the second round with a rear naked choke. Other than that, again, we don't see much finishing ability from him. And Carlston Harris has a ton of finishing ability at any point in the fight. Second round, first round, strikes, submissions. You know, he finished Impa Kasankine in the first round, and that was a really good win for him by KO. He got a submission win over Aguilera in the first against Sajid Izgakmayev. He got a dash choke in the second round. That was a 17-1 guy on UAE Warriors. That's how he got into the UFC in the first place on Dana White's Looking for a Fight. So I'm trusting in Carlston Harris with the finishing ability advantage. We move on. Tyson Nam versus Bruno Silva. The majority of people are picking Tyson Nam here as the underdog. I'm not gonna pick him. Bruno Silva's pretty good and pretty technical for a flyweight, and I know we haven't seen him much recently, so maybe he's not fresh in everyone's memory like Tyson Nam's KO win over Ode Osborne is. But he's really good. Really good. Trains with Henry Cejudo, or has trained with Henry Cejudo before. And his last two wins, he's looked like a new fighter. That's how I see Bruno Silva. Early on in his career, you know, he had a loss to Girill Bekov, somewhat competitive. A somewhat competitive loss to David Dvorak. Not too shabby. Those are pretty decent fighters in the flyweight division. But after that, I know his level of opponent dropped, but it looked like his hands were finally working. You know what I mean? It looked like his boxing was finally improved to a point to where he's going to be really dangerous. He's had a lot of time off. Tyson Nam, of course, beat Ode Osborne by KO. 39 years of age, though, man. Am I going to trust him to get another KO win over Bruno Silva, who's hard to finish, keeps his chin tucked, and has good boxing fundamentals in that division? I don't think I am. I'm actually going to go with Bruno Silva by finish over Tyson Nam by TKO. Even though the majority of people are really going to sway the line movement in Tyson Nam's favour because loads of people are picking Tyson Nam, I'm going to go with Bruno Silva, despite his record being a bit dirty. He actually has got some real ability as a fighter. We move on. Up the card, Tony Gravely versus Victor Henry is on the prelims. I'm going to go with Victor Henry here. Tony Gravely, just in my opinion, doesn't have the slickness of an Assuncao, nor does he have real terrifying, dangerous power enough to earn respect from Victor Henry. We saw Victor Henry sort of get stumped against Assuncao because he just kept getting outworked and out-techniqued by Assuncao, kept getting caught clean on the chin. Tony Gravely kind of like stalls out fights with his own pace and his own grind and his own hustle. So I'm going to side with Victor Henry here because I don't see him getting held down by Tony Gravely. And if he doesn't get held down, and it ends up being a fight where Gravely's trying to take him down and Henry's getting back up and Gravely goes for another takedown and Henry gets back up, I can see Henry doing more in terms of damage in between those moments. So I'm going to side with Victor Henry by decision. I think he'll out-hustle Tony Gravely in a decision back-and-forth fight, 29-28 to him. We move on to another fight up the card, which is JJ Aldrich versus Ariane Lipski. I think JJ Aldrich is really underrated. I've always mentioned this about JJ Aldrich. I think people who have watched my videos before have noticed that I mention her in quite decently high regard, even though she hasn't really had any amazing wins or strung together too much success. She's been around for ages. She's still 30 years of age. And she trains with the best. Like, she trained with Namajunas, she trained with Shevchenko, she's trained with really good fighters. And she didn't do bad against Blanchfield. I know she got guillotined in the second, standing guillotine choked. But she was doing all right before then. You know what I mean? She was dealing with the grappling. She was having her own success as well. And it was kind of like Blanchfield found that guillotine and, you know, wiped her brow and got through that test in JJ Aldrich. She beat Gillian Robertson, who's great at grappling as well. So I don't see Ariane Lipski being able to pull off her knee bar submission here or any kind of submission in that case whatsoever. She's coming off a KO loss to Priscilla Cachoeira as well. I can just see JJ Aldrich beating her up to a decision win, 30-27, winning every round, winning the grappling exchanges, and making Ariane Lipski a little bit gun-shy as the fight goes on. So I'm definitely going to side with JJ Aldrich here, being the better, more well-rounded fighter overall, and a bit tougher. We move on. Up the card. Mario Bautista versus Guido Cannetti. Now, Mario Bautista is a 10-1 favourite, which is crazy, because Guido is dangerous. You know what I mean? But it's because we've seen how Mario Bautista has been looking recently in his career, and I think that's mainly why people are picking him to win this one. Should he be a 10-1 favourite? No, he shouldn't. Guido Cannetti does have an ability to cause an upset. He's dangerous in that regard. He's got power in his hands, but 43 years of age, Randy Costa, Chris Matinho, you're talking bottom of the barrel in terms of the bantamweight division. Mario Bautista might be on his way to the top of the barrel in the bantamweight division. 29 years of age, coming into his prime, on a 3-fight win streak. Got caught by Trevin Jones, but before that he was winning the fight. He was doing good, doing his thing. He beat Miles Johns before that as well. Other than that, his only loss is to Corey Sandhagen. You know what I mean? So I'm going to trust in Mario Bautista to win this one. His last 2 performances specifically, he beat Kelleher better than Umar Nurmagomedov did. Schooled him and finished him in the first round with a rear naked choke. And then Benito Lopez looked like he didn't even belong in there with him. Like, it's just, Mario Bautista seems to have hit this prime in his career. I don't see Guido Cannetti being the person who's able to stop that. If it was a bantamweight like a Davey Grant, maybe a bit more dangerous, a bit better, maybe then there'd be a chance at an upset a bit more, but I just don't see Guido being that guy. So I'm going to go with Mario Bautista getting this one done by submission. I think he'll take down Guido, get his back and sub him. We move on. Up the card, Sedriques Dumas versus Josh Fremd. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Fremd, is that how it's pronounced? Either way. Sedriques Dumas. I'm picking him to win. Dangerous. 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 This guy's dangerous. Great ability. Been looking forward to his debut in the UFC. It got postponed. Who was he supposed to fight originally? Abu Azaitar on this card. Didn't get postponed. He was supposed to fight Abu Azaitar on this card. Josh Fremd took this fight on not too short of notice, but reasonably short notice. So he's not had as much time to prepare as Sedriques Dumas has. And Josh Fremd is the type of guy who sort of puts a pace on people. So him taking this one on short notice is like, you know, he's been finished a few times in his career now, brutally as well. Got finished by Gregory Rodriguez on the regional scene brutally, out-hustled by Hernandez for 3 straight rounds. Tresean Gore whipped him up in that guillotine badly, and that was a really devastating loss. There's an ability to finish him. He just got guillotined, and on the Contender Series, Sedriques Dumas had a wicked guillotine finish after showing ability on the feet as well. I know he hasn't fought the best of opponents, but he's got a good amateur career for a heavier weight class guy. He's on a roll in the pro career so far. I think he'll keep his momentum, and I think he'll find another finish in the first round here over Josh Fremd. I say he hurts Fremd on the feet, latches up a guillotine as he shoots for a takedown afterwards. We move on to another fight up the card, which is Raphael Assuncao versus Davey Grant. I'm going to go with Davey Grant because he just doesn't care. And it's weird how good he can be in just by having that mindset of not caring about losing. He's dangerous, okay? Dangerous Davey Grant. I know he's lost some fights to Marlon Vera, where he did a good job in round 1 in that fight. Let's be real. And then sort of lost it at the end of round 2 and then got beaten up in round 3. Tough as they come. Tough as they come, no doubt about that. You ain't finishing this guy easily. Do not see Assuncao getting a finish. I could see Davey Grant getting a finish. And that's the difference maker again here. I could see Assuncao getting caught and overwhelmed and hit by something funky. By Davey Grant. Or maybe his calf starts to go out and Grant's chopped at his legs enough. I just don't see Grant getting finished by Assuncao. But I do see Assuncao potentially getting finished by Grant. Also, I thought Grant beat Adrian Yanez. And I was thinking to myself, maybe I should pick Assuncao here because he does have slick boxing, but so does Yanez. And Grant was still able to do his thing against him, and I thought he won that fight pretty clearly, but no one else seems to say that. Anyone else in the comments? Did you watch that fight? I've watched it multiple times. I think Grant won that fight, and I think he got robbed. But close fight, though. But still, the technical boxing savvy of Yanez wasn't enough, and I think that's what Assuncao's kind of relying on here. And I just think any kind of boxing with Davey Grant is risky. Not to mention what he did to Jonathan Martinez, who's a great bantamweight prospect himself right now. Flattened him out cold. So I'm going to go with Davey Grant. Too dangerous. I think he finds a finish by KO. Second round. We move on. Up the card, Lukasz Brzeski versus Carl Williams. I'm going to go with Lukasz Brzeski here. If Carl Williams had more of a finishing potential, I may have picked him, because I think it would be a lot more dangerous in the first round. I've said finishing potential and dangerous like 5 times this video. I just don't see that from him against a certain level of competition. You know, the guy he fought in the Contender Series, he took to a decision. The UFC is always going to sign people in higher weight classes. Decision on PFL. Lost by triangle choke to a certain fighter, Jason Butcher, who was 12-4, the only really decent fighter on his regional record so far. But a whole bunch of decisions for a heavier weight class fighter is what I'm really trying to get at here. He's good, he can grapple, he can strike, but Lukasz Brzeski is really a good hustler at heavyweight. And also, Carl Williams isn't the biggest of heavyweights either. His last weigh-in, I believe, was at 235 pounds. So he's not a big dude. And neither is Brzeski, but it's not like he's going to be able to rely on just absolute mass to be able to get Brzeski to the ground or to be able to out-hustle him on the feet. So Brzeski's got good cardio over 3 rounds at heavyweight. He's had his UFC debut. He got robbed against Bidet as well. He's probably on the sauce because he got popped coming into the UFC. So I'm going to trust in him to out-hustle Carl Williams to a 29-28 decision after a rough start in round 1. We move on. Up the card, Victor Petrino versus Anton Turkalj. I'm going to go with Anton Turkalj as an underdog. Anton Turkalj as an underdog. Oh, he lost to Jailton Almeida. You know what I mean? Like, sorry. He's not a heavyweight. Neither was Jailton Almeida, I get it, but this guy definitely isn't a heavyweight. He weighed in for that heavyweight bout at 214 pounds on very short notice to get into the UFC. And he lost to Jailton Almeida. I get it. Other than that, he had a very experienced amateur career where he fought some good opponents, 7-0 guy, 9-3 guy, fought a bunch of really good guys on the IMMAF World Championships 2017, 2018. He's been through tournament stages. I think he's very good. Very good. And I think he's got really good grappling for a heavier weight class guy. And I'm noticing how much grappling is important in a heavier weight class. Now, Vitor Petrino is a physical specimen. And he has brutal KO power. So he is more likely to get a first round finish out of the pair of them. Let's be real. But he did get taken down on the Contender Series. He got dropped on the Contender Series. I watched that fight. At times, he's sloppy. Now, against someone who doesn't have much of a takedown threat, like the guy he was taking on in Bellato, that's not going to cost him too much. You know, that guy Bellato was rocking him and then going for suplexes and losing position and not being able to control him. I think if Turkalj can time it well enough, he can shoot a double leg under some of those sloppy, big hooks from Vitor Petrino and find himself the upset. Now, Vitor Petrino is so dangerous. I completely understand it. I just think Turkalj is experienced enough. You know, he had a submission grappling competition with Alexander Gustafsson 2019. So he's around good people. He's training well. I think he'll be able to find the takedowns here and slow down Vitor Petrino. So I'm actually going to go with Anton Turkalj. And also, Petrino gets up with brute strength. And he gives up his back when he does it. I noticed that about him as well. So I'm going to trust in Turkalj to be able to find the back. I'll say 3rd round rear naked choke for Anton Turkalj here. And he got up 3 times against Jailton Almeida. I know he got taken down and dominated in round 1, but he found his way back up to his feet against a cage a few times. And that's saying something against Almeida these days. We move on to another fight up the card. Said Nurmagomedov versus Jonathan Martinez. I'm going to trust in Said Nurmagomedov's grappling ability and being too tricky on the feet for Jonathan Martinez. It's a tough fight to pick because, again, Jonathan Martinez is a very dangerous fighter, and we did just see Said Nurmagomedov really put to the test against Sadyakub Kakramanov. Justice for him. He deserves to be back in the UFC. No idea why they cut him from the UFC. But we've seen him take on dangerous fighters, man. Subbed up Cody Stamann. Douglas Silva, the Andrade fight was a close one. Don't get me wrong, but he won it, clearly. Beat Mark Striegel, who was 18-2. Lost to Barcelos in moments, got out-hustled in the grappling. I just think he has the options. Whereas Jonathan Martinez has to win the striking or it's trouble. You know what I mean? And then you've got Said Nurmagomedov, who just has those options. And also for Jonathan Martinez, he's looked good in his fights, but the opponents that he's been taking on recently. Cub Swanson. Fair play, he's Cub Swanson, but it's not Cub Swanson anymore. Especially not coming down to bantamweight. And that was very obvious. Vince Morales decision, Perez decision, Zviad Lazvishvili decision. I think, again, Said, more finishing potential with the grappling implemented. More options to win the fight, 100% as well. I think he can mix it up and get a 29-28 split decision. Said Nurmagomedov. I'm going to trust him to win this one. Jonathan Martinez relies on his kicks a lot. If Said moves like a guy who's good at evading kicks with his footwork and his movement, very high movement guy, not stationary to just be kicked as he plods forward or anything like that. So I think that's going to take away from Martinez's game a bit, and he's going to be left to box a bit more. I don't think he's as dangerous with his boxing, so I'll go Said Nurmagomedov. We move on. Up the card, Ricardo Ramos versus Austin Lingo. No-brainer. Austin Lingo just isn't really that good. He's young, 28, so I'm not going to trash him too much. Like, maybe he improves. But I've just watched a few... You know those people that, like, you fluked it, innit? You know what I mean? Some people you look at in the UFC and you think to yourself, lucky you. You know what I mean? Because there's another world where this guy never made it to the UFC. Let's just say it how it is. Like, even his 2 wins, Luis Saldana, Jacob Kilburn, bottom of the barrel in the featherweight division. Bottom of the barrel. Not good opponents whatsoever to be fighting in the UFC. He had some decent wins outside of it. He beat Solo Hatley Jr. But then again, like, Solo Hatley Jr. still young, still doing his thing, but has received a few losses since then. Hasn't really made something of his career, even if he did have a bit of hype coming into the UFC. Or not coming into the UFC, but coming into MMA. Austin Lingo is not that good. And Ricardo Ramos is good. Had the fight with Zubaira Tukhugov, who I know isn't the best, but he's experienced, Dagestani, well-trained. Beat Bill Algeo in a close fight. Bill Algeo, someone I have a lot of respect for. Took it to Andre Fili in their fight that they had. Beat Danny Chavez. Had a tough fight with Lerone Murphy where he got finished with ground and pound, but I think and also got finished by Said Nurmagomedov, but I think he's above the bottom tier level of fighters, and I think Austin Lingo is probably about bottom tier level as a fighter. I'm going to go Ricardo Ramos. I think he'll get a finish as well. I think he'll get a TKO. We move on. Up the card to another fight, which is Nikita Krylov versus Ryan Spann. I'm going to stick with Nikita Krylov. I know he was the one that pulled out of their fight. I don't know if I trust Ryan Spann to cut weight. He's missed weight a lot of times in his career. He's a massive guy for the division. His last weigh-in was at 206.6 pounds. He didn't even make weight in his last fight. He made weight for the Krylov fight, I get it, but 2 weeks later, he's cutting the weight again. I know Krylov was ill. So you might be saying, oh, but Krylov's ill. What are you talking about? I almost feel like that's going to help him with a weight cut. Because if there was one fighter that was eating a bit on that weekend, it weren't Krylov with his upset stomach. Krylov was probably like, oh, I don't want any food right now. Just give me some water and I'll recover from this and get back to work. So I think Krylov's got it. I think Spann's going to have a nightmare weight cut. I think 2 of them back-to-back are going to affect him. And I think we're going to see Krylov be able to push the pace and take him down and wear him out into the later rounds and get a TKO at some point later on, I reckon, to ground and pound and mount. Who knows how it's going to go? Maybe a rear naked choke, a sub in the 2nd or 3rd round. Spann's got to win by 1st round finish. And he could do that, 2 weight cuts back to back. I think it affects him more than Krylov. Wouldn't be surprised if Krylov did it intentionally. Because Krylov, although he's a big dude for the division, he can make weight pretty easily. You know what I mean? He can make weight pretty easily. He's lean. He's not as big as Ryan Spann. He's a light heavyweight. Spann could well be a heavyweight. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm going to trust in Nikita Krylov. Even though he was ill, been 2 weeks, he's definitely recovered since then. I think the illness will help him keep his weight down in that time period. It's just about the 2 weight cuts back to back. Let me just double check this is at 205 again. It is. Yeah, I got to take Krylov. I think Spann's going to really struggle with the weight, and I think he'll miss, and I think he'll gas and lose. We move on. Up the card to another fight, Alexander Volkov versus Alexander Romanov. This is a tough one. This is a really, really tough one. Because Volkov will outstrike him on the feet. He will outstrike him on the feet. I'm going to go with Romanov, though. I think Romanov's got a style of grappling that can be effective against Alexander Volkov. I think it can. And I think he can get a finish. I'm actually going to call an Alexander Romanov forearm choke finish over Alexander Volkov. I think Volkov's got decent enough grappling, but once he's flat on his back, it's a real problem for him to try and get himself back up. He's too tall for it almost, to get his body weight under him and to posture up. I think it's going to be a problem if he gets laid flat against a guy who's so top heavy in Romanov, because they're both very heavy guys for the division. I completely understand. Let me look at their recent weigh-ins. Alexander Volkov, I believe, is what? 256 pounds. Very, very big guy for the heavyweight division. Alexander Romanov, 240 pounds. But Romanov's weight is all in the top half of his body, and I think if he gets Volkov flat in the first round, Volkov's going to get mounted and beaten up, I think. I think he will. He will outstrike Romanov. And originally when this fight got made, I thought to myself, yeah, I reckon Volkov's got this. But the more I think about the style of it, fair enough, Romanov gassed out in the fight against Tybura, lost a majority decision, should have got a 10-8 in the first round. It should have been a draw. And I know Volkov beat Tybura and showed good grappling, but I do feel like Romanov's going to get this one. It was at altitude as well. And he still pushed a crazy pace in round 1 and made it till the 3rd with a guy like Tybura. So I think if there's no altitude, he'll learn from that. And I think he'll be able to control Volkov a little bit easier than Tybura, curling up and making it difficult for him. I reckon he picks up Volkov early, slams him, and gets right into mount. Right into mount early on. And I think that's going to make it a very different grappling match for Alexander Volkov. And I think that's where the advantage is, to be honest with you. I think that's where the advantage is. Very tough fight to call. I almost wish Romanov was the underdog. Volkov's the underdog. I wish I was getting underdog points here because I'm going against the grain in terms of majority of people that are picking this fight. But man, Aspinall made him look like a white belt on the ground. I know it's Aspinall, but I think it's just about once he's flat on the canvas. Blades don't pass. He'll sit in full guard like he did with Overeem and land those elbows, but he couldn't quite get him off against Volkov because he's so tall. Romanov will pass. And with his slams, he can get straight to half guard on top as well. I think there's a lot less work for him against Volkov to get positional control over him. So yeah, I'm actually going to side with... I'm going to side with Romanov here, to be honest with you. I just see a bad style matchup for Volkov. We move on. Up the card, Petr Yan versus Merab Dvalishvili. I'm going with Petr Yan. So pick Merab, I guess, because I can't pick a main event. 74% of people on Tapology are picking Yan. They're about to be wrong, because I'm picking him as well. Amazing matchup, though. Great. This is a great card, is it not? The top 3 fights. I know it wasn't supposed to have Krylov versus Spann, but with that added on, this is a really good fight night. I wish that Krylov-Spann fight was opening up the main card, though, to give it some space, but I think Yan's got this one in the bag. I do. I was watching Merab's fight with Marlon Moraes. I know it's Marlon Moraes and he's dangerous and he is going to drop people early, and that's just how it goes with him. He's open on the feet, man. He is. And I know he can push people against the cage. Aldo kind of accepted it, though. There are opportunities when this fight is on the feet for Yan. I don't see him getting finished by Merab. Can you agree with me on that? I do not see him getting finished by Merab. If Merab wins, he stalls out the fight for 5 rounds and is able to push Jan against a cage, knee him to the fire, and just sort of stall it out, grind him out, and keep taking him down and make it that type of fight. I do not see him finishing Jan. Jan is one of the most unfinishable fighters on the roster. He just implemented grappling in his last training camp against Sean O'Malley. Of course, he had the rematch with Aljamain Sterling. It was a very grappling-heavy training camp, no doubt. I think he's had a lot of back-to-back grappling preparation here. Not saying he's going to use it offensively, but it's going to be a part of his camp in his last few. I think he'll carry that over to this one. Still being a young fighter, I think that will hone his skills in the grappling department. I don't see Merab taking him down, or keeping him down, should I say. And I can see Jan tagging him with shots off the break in the clinch. Merab lingers in the clinch at times. He'll get separated but stay in the pocket and keep feinting and try and push in again to get the clinch against the cage. I think Jan's going to be doing a lot of breaking the grip and an elbowing over the top and catching Merab and Merab backing up a bit. And now it's Jan's turn to come forward. I can see that happening towards the end of a lot of the rounds in this fight. And I think Jan will capitalize on those moments. I'm going to go over Piotr Jan, decision win or late rounds TKO. I'm not too decided on what one of them is going to be. But I do see him having moments where he hurts Merab. Merab striking is good when he has your respect. I think once Jan realizes he can get back up and stuff the takedowns, and Merab starts to lose a little bit of that power in his shots, I think the late round power of Jan is so much higher than Merab's, and I think he'll start to catch him. Move, separate, pop, right hand on the chin. Merab gets stumbled, off balance, goes down, tries to shoot in as Jan rushes in, you know. I think we're going to see Jan get a 49-46 decision or a 48-47, winning this fight based on damage. I also want to chuck in the idea, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the last few events that we've had in the UFC, seems like the referees are very anti-Merab. I'm going to chuck that in there as well. Don't know if you saw last event, UFC 285, the refs are clapping. And by that I mean, I make it clap. Not in Yoel Romero way, but they're in there saying, let's get to work whenever fighters are in the clinch against the cage. They're really asking for activity now. I think that doesn't help Merab. I think if it starts being a snooze fest in a paid-for arena in the Virgin Hotels with a lot of rich people in the crowd that want a good event, I think there's going to be pressure on Merab to keep it at space or work way harder in the clinch. I think Jan's going to catch him. I think Jan has big moments and wins on damage. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.